All right. We're reading Ecclesiastes, chapter 1. It says here, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north, and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All the streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a striving after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. The word of the Lord. Everybody, Christian or not, religious or not, moral or immoral, is looking for their life to have meaning. Everybody wants meaning. We have to have it. Okay? They cannot stand for their life to not have meaning. So we ask questions as we're growing up, as we get older, as we're young. We start asking questions like, what is our purpose in life? What are we here for? What's this life for? Why is this life so frustrating? Some are content to say that we just need to face up to the fact that we have no meaning. Last century, philosophy saw the rise of nihilism or existential philosophy through people like Friedrich Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, Michael Foucault, and other postmodernists as well. Other existential writers, including Ernest Hemingway. Okay, and everybody wants to have this control over their lives, and everybody wants to know that they can affect their lives or life in the world in such a way so as to be remembered or to be counted among the greats. But life often has other plans for us. Many Christians, in fact, in a sense, feeling the spillover sense of purposeless lives, they've turned to psychological ploys in order to affect purpose in their own lives. They've sought wisdom from many different places. Okay, it's pretty common in a sense for Christians to partake of things like either like self-help or pop psychology. They'll use tactics from the business world in order to find success and meaning in their lives. Okay, but no matter what they do, life is still the same. I mean, you can only read, books like, what are some popular ones? Think and Grow Rich, some of those guys. You can only read those for so much, and it's like, what, it didn't do it. Nothing happened. Life is still the same. You can read all the self-help books in the world, but, nothing has changed. The world moves on with you or without you. You come to that stark realization. And as I say these words, I hope that nobody here is going through any sort of depression. Okay, this can be a very depressing book if you read it. Okay, you get past chapter 1 and you kind of close the book, slam it, and go, that shouldn't be in the Bible. What's that doing in there? Where's the happy stuff? But the book of Ecclesiastes, it really does put a rather dim look on life. It can come across that way, and we have to admit it's a very realistic perspective on life. Once you really listen to what it has to say, it is a very realistic perspective on life. Life isn't always the roses that a lot of these pop psychology books and human wisdom promise us. As Christians, we have glimpses of an age to come through the Holy Spirit, but the reality is that there's still much of the fallen world around us, and we cannot live as if we're in heaven right now. So the book of Ecclesiastes was written to help us maintain, in a sense, this balance in our wisdom and to have a wisdom approach to how we live now. As we go through it, we're going to look first at some keys to Ecclesiastes. Then we're going to see the reality of the world that we live in, along with the avenues in which we try to find meaning and something permanent to cling to. And finally, we'll see what kind of life we must ultimately find our meaning in. So, let's delve in first. The keys to Ecclesiastes. The author of Ecclesiastes has traditionally been said to be Solomon. In chapter 1, verse 1, and in verse 12, the writer identifies himself as the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, king over Israel in Jerusalem. Now, that could only mean Solomon, because if you remember, the kingdom was split. Okay, after Solomon, the kingdom split. And the northern kingdom, when it split, was known as Israel, and the southern kingdom was known as the kingdom of Judah. Okay, so if he's king of Israel in Jerusalem, this has to be, it's describing a pre-split, basically. Okay. However, scholars have identified internal evidences in the book that lead them to think that maybe it was not written by Solomon, but it was written a little bit after his time, maybe during his time, but not by him. Kind of like with the Songs of Solomon, maybe somebody wrote it in the tradition of Solomon, in the tradition of his wisdom, well after his life. Okay, but whoever the author is, there is wisdom that is being taught through the use of a character named the preacher. Okay, or Kohelet in the Hebrew. So in a sense, what's happening in the book is the author, he kind of steps into character. Okay, so you almost imagine him, he's in front of people, okay? He's maybe before a crowd, and like the term Kohelet, preacher, it means like a convener, a person who gathers people, okay? An assembler in some sort of ways as well. So he's gathering his people, and then he steps into character. Okay, and he's going to be using this character to basically make his point. Okay, by the end of the book, in 12:8, he steps out of character, and he speaks in the third person in order to make the wisdom point of the book, which we'll get to momentarily. Now, the first thing out of the mouth of the preacher, it's not some eloquent wisdom. Okay, it doesn't start out like Proverbs. Okay, it's not the most inspirational thing in the world. First words out of his mouth: vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Now, the Hebrew word for vanity is the word hebel. Okay, we've heard it before. It's the name that is translated as Abel in Genesis chapter 4, the brother of Cain. Okay, it means a vapor, a breath that vanishes. It means something like insignificant, futile, futility. In some instances, it can even mean worthless. Okay. In other places, it means vain human efforts or the futile nature of a thing. The word occurs about 38 times alone in the book of Ecclesiastes. So then he continues. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All the streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. All things are full of weariness, and man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new, it has already been in the ages before us? There is no remembrance of the former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. Now, what is the preacher saying here? He's pointing out, in a sense, the cyclic or the repetitive aspects, the things that we observe in life, okay? And he's basically asking, what's the point of it all? The sun always goes up and it always goes down. It doesn't do anything new. Okay? Streams and rivers, they always flow into the ocean. The ocean's never full. It's not somehow, rising or anything like that. It keeps happening over and over and over. It's like, where does all this water come from? But the sea never gets full. I don't understand it. The wind, it goes and goes. It's pattern. You know what? It's back. And it doesn't somehow take you for a loop. It's not like we're living in the Matrix and these glitches all of a sudden happen in nature. In the sense, he says it's all so predictable. If it's all so predictable, if the same thing just happens over and over and over and over again, I get up and I work 8 to 5, I come home, eat, sleep, get up, work 8 to 5, eat, sleep. It's like, what's the point of it? What's the point of it if things are just going to be the same? We work, what do we really gain? What are we really doing? Do we really have an impact on the world? Some of us, we have jobs, that we kind of get it like this, we wake up, go, and, I teach PE, boom, exercise, okay, come home, eat, train, sleep, do it again, it's a repeat cycle, and you guys know what it's like, repeat cycle, do it again, repeat cycle, Maybe you have a little bit more of an exciting job, but again, it's still the same thing. No matter how you cut it, it's still the same thing over and over and over and over again. And he asked the question, what does a man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? What is it for? What am I doing? Is there an impact? Am I even making a difference? Now, the phrase under the sun is also very important to understand in Ecclesiastes. The phrase occurs about 29 times. Okay? Some commentators have suggested that it means secular. Okay, or that it means, in a sense, like a naturalistic, materialistic point of view. Okay, in a sense, to be a hardcore atheist. Okay, but however, these categories of thought presuppose much more modern developments. That is to say, intellectual atheism and naturalistic materialism and all these fancy things that we deal with today were not around when Solomon wrote this book. Okay, they were much later developments. The phrase is just another way of saying the things of this world, okay? The things of this age, the things in this life. Okay? That's all it's trying to say. It does not necessarily mean life without God, because the author clearly presupposes that God is. Okay, and theoretical atheism was not even a religious option back then in any culture. I mean, every culture back then believed in a God. Okay, not necessarily the God, but they were all theists in some sort of way. So they couldn't imagine life without any God in that way. All right, so in a sense, life under the sun just means life without a regard for God. Okay, life without God at the center. So what the preacher's basically saying is this. He says this, basically, if you only live for your work, if you only live for your job, if you only live for your career, or for whatever it is that you do, okay, and he's going to suggest some things in a bit of what he tried to live for, okay, but if you only live for something in this life, whatever it is, you're going to find that whatever you do, you're going to find at the end of it that it didn't even matter. That it didn't even make a lasting impact in the world. It didn't even make a big difference. Whether you were some author who wrote 20 books, or you just played ping pong for your life, the things that happened in the world would have happened with you or without you. They would have happened with you or without you. Myself, I'm a teacher. And in the long run, I can look, even just in the short run right now, but how many of my kids even, remember who I am? How many of them care to remember who I am? How much recognition, do I get, as a coach? In your own jobs, how much recognition do you even get? Did you make a world impact? But even then, if you do, how many years, until nobody even cares and nobody remembers your name? Oh, you made National Teacher of the Year? Anybody here know who a National Teacher of the Year was in any previous year? Doesn't even matter. Doesn't even matter. Hey, I got Employee of the Month. Who cares? And give it a couple of months, nobody will even know. The plaque where all the names are, when the new year comes and they take that plaque down, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to care. And he continues, he's really grim. I mean, you really do want to give the guy a hug. You really do. But he's brutally realistic. When I was studying this, I heard a few sermons on it, and I read I read 3 whole books. I have about 2 other books that I just kind of used. They were 2 other commentaries. But, after all the reading and the studying that I did, I was like, Ecclesiastes is just a sober punch in the face about life. It's a real sober punch in the face. He continues, a generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. I mean, he's basically saying it's like if you put your hand in a vase full of water, while your hand is in there, it's got a little impact. You pull your hand out, and what happens? You didn't leave an impression on the water. The rest of the water just caves right in, and it's like your hand wasn't even there. Like, that's it. The world just keeps turning. It keeps going with you or without you. And a lot of times we like to feel like our lives are like the center of the universe. We think, especially when we fall in love, that the world is just revolving around us. But how quickly life can let you down. Life can let you know that that the world doesn't care. When you break up, you lose your job. When tragedy strikes, the world doesn't stop for us. You can be the coolest person when you were in school. You get caught doing one wrong thing, it can ruin your life forever, and suddenly you're nobody. You can be the coolest kid in high school. You enter the workforce, and all of a sudden you're nobody. You can be the coolest kid in high school. You get to college, and you're a freshman, you're nobody. It changes. The world changes. College athletes, they feel it. Or high school athletes. Start with them. They're stars in high school. They get to college, they might be riding the bench for 4 years. And then college athletes, they might be really good in college. They get to the professional level, and they're riding the bench. Everything changes. It just changes. Suddenly nobody cares what kind of grades you made or what sport you played or how many books you read or how many points you made or how many touchdowns you made. At some point it's all vanity. I can see everybody's just depressed here thinking about this. But I'm telling you, Ecclesiastes is just a sober punch in the face. It's a big slap. It's a big wake-up call. What has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. You want to make a difference in life, but you come to realize, with the preacher when he says, what is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be counted. That is to say that there are some things that you want to fix in the world that no matter how big your ambitions sometimes, I'm going to change government. I'm going to change city politics. You get in there and you find yourself becoming part of the corrupt system that you went in there to change. You find yourself being sucked right in as well. And no matter how much you try to change poverty in the world, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do so much good, and it's like, very few people do that. And then the ones that do, a lot of times we don't even know their names anymore. We don't even know their names. It kind of reminds me, I know this is kind of funny, but it's sort of similar. If you guys ever saw Saturday Night Live with Chris Farley, when he played a role by the name of Matt Foley, where he's supposed to be this motivational speaker, but it's like, uses reverse psychology or whatever, the way he did it. But, he's trying to motivate these kids. And, they're like, I want to be a writer. And, Matt Foley's just like, well, whoop-de-doo. You know what's going to end up happening? You're going to end up living in a van down by the river. And it's rather funny, but that's kind of what the preacher's doing in a sense here. He's basically saying all those aspirations, all those dreams that you have, you better start getting real about them. You better start getting real. Governments will always be corrupt. The poor will always be. Injustices are always going to be around too. There are always going to be questions that just never get answered, and life on earth can be one frustration right after the other. And so, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. But our souls are restless, and they still long to have a significance. They still long to have a significance. They know that we were created for something, and so we search. And the preacher searched. And he shares some of the wisdom of where he went searching. Okay, so let's follow him for a little bit by surveying Ecclesiastes with him. Okay, first, he says that he went the way of pleasure. Okay, this starts off in chapter 2. Okay, hedonism is a fancy word that means the pursuit of pleasure as the highest good. Okay, it means basically going after sensual pleasures as the highest thing, as the highest goal, or as the highest meaning in life. Okay. The first person, in a sense, who made this sort of pleasure the highest goal was a man by the name of Aristippus. He was a Greek philosopher. He was a student of Socrates, but he's the one who founded, in a sense, the school of hedonist. Okay, and so he says in chapter 2, verses 2 through 3, he says, "I said of laughter, of pleasure with wine, and how to lay hold of folly, till I might see what was good." So there it is. He's looking for in what has traditionally been called in philosophy the summum bonum, the highest good. Okay, what is the ultimate in life? What's this life for? That's what he's looking at here. Okay, and so and he's going after pleasure. Okay, this kind of life is pretty common in our culture. In fact, our culture plays to it in a lot of ways. Okay, just think of all the pleasures that we look for in life. Okay, what are the goods that we are sold all the time in commercials and television and such? Okay, and I'll name a few. Okay, first, there's the pleasures of sex. There are the pleasures of sex. And I don't have to say much about this for anyone here to know that sex is absolutely everywhere. In fact, sex is sold as the ultimate in life, as it's often the climax of love movies. Okay, pornography portrays sex as something that is the ultimate in life. It's sold as something that, you know what, you have to be good at. It's sold as something that you should always be looking to be engaged in or to get whenever and wherever you can. But just as porn stars, sex is ultimately futile. It is ultimately futile. They don't find any lasting satisfaction in them. In fact, they're torn. A lot of their lives are really torn apart. Their lives are really, really shattered. Life can't be about sex. You know, what will you do, you know, when you come to a point where you can no longer have it? Either you're too old or something happens, you know, and all of a sudden your life is ruined. The fact is that sex is not enough. Ask Solomon, he's another one. And the interesting thing about the preachers, you know what, as Solomon, he had the money and he had the time to pursue all these things. So it's not like he's making these up. He had the money, he had the time to go after whatever he wanted. He had limitless resources to find, in a sense, his happiness, to find meaning in this life. Ask Wilt Chamberlain, ask anybody who's been down that path, and they will tell you that it's never enough. Going from partner to partner, getting more perverse every time, because you realize that, you know, in a sense, it's, you know, if I can just be so crude, it's just sex. Once you kind of, in a sense, strip away everything from it, it's just sex. That's it. That's all it is. You know, and it's just as empty as anything else. You know, it's kind of like, you know, in a sense, like children sometimes. They get a new toy, they play with it for 5 minutes, next. You know, that's it. You know, it's like, acabó todo, that's it. It's done. Nothing new under the sun. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter the partner in some ways. It's just sex. Now, another thing that rings true in our culture today is alcohol. And the preacher mentions that he did this through wine. He says, "I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine." Okay, that's in 2:3. Now, let me be clear. Okay, the Bible does not condemn alcohol. Okay, what it does condemn is its abuse. Okay, in the sense of worshiping it too. Wine was the preferred drink in ancient times because they didn't have Fiji water back then. Okay, water was really dirty back then. Wine was a lot cleaner than water. So it was actually what people drank. They drank it like the way we drink water now. Okay, or diet sodas or anything like that. Okay, but some people live for the drink. Some people, they live for it. Okay, some people, they just live to get drunk. They can't wait for the weekend to pick up the 18 and head out to the clubs and get their drank on, okay, and go get faded, and all the little terms that are being used. You know, you know what I'm talking about. You know, but, you know, this is, you know, and you can see people, they put little terms on it, you know, to help themselves out. You know, I'm going to go get crunk, you know, and all sorts of things like that to make it sound cool, you know. But ultimately, you know, it's futile and it's empty. It's futile. I mean, let's face it, you know, you still have to sober up. It's going to have to wear off. You're still going to have the hangover and all the problems that you thought would be drowned in alcohol. You learn that they float. And you learn that they float very well. If you have to drink to come to life, you know, too, then how shallow is your life that you don't know how to be you and you have to lose control of yourself just to come out? It's vanity. It's all vanity. It's empty. And then there is the vanity of possessions and material things. Okay, these include things like the accrual of wealth, the accrual of material things, like houses, cars, expensive clothing, the latest gadgets and technology, in a sense, always trying to keep up with the Joneses. Okay, and the preacher says, he says he made great works. He built houses and planted vineyards for myself, he says. And I also had great possessions. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings. Our society is pretty much consumed with the same things. In fact, advertising, if you look at the whole advertising industry, it's basically built on this drive to want to build your life on these things. In a sense, if you look at commercials, look at who they use. They use the beautiful and the happy people in commercials because basically what they're trying to say is basically something like this. If you want to have happiness and if you want to have meaning in this life, then you need to have our product. And it can come across so strongly, it's basically saying, if you don't have this product, you're a loser. You're one of them. You're on the outside. You're not cool. You're not hip. Pay attention to it. I mean, you find it's inevitably true. I mean, look at cigarette commercials. Everybody's all happy, puffing and smoking away. They don't show you Juan down the street with stained teeth and dying of lung cancer or slowly getting lung cancer. They don't show you that guy to sell their product. They show you people being happy, people being beautiful, and telling you this is where life is at. Rich people, you can watch shows. I'm obviously going old school here, but something like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, those Cribs. I think those are others. I don't know what else is out there, but they show you people having all these great things, but they don't show you when the camera stops rolling and the anxiety that's in their life to try to keep up their performance and their career just so they can make mortgage, or the things that happen because they're fighting over possessions in their household or with family. They don't show you that part. They just show you, I have nice things, cool. This is my, I was watching Shaquille O'Neal's. He's got like this 30-foot bed or something like that, custom made, costing $30,000. And it's like, that's cool, that's great. But, there's a lot more that they end up having to deal with because of stardom. Movie stars are the same thing. A lot of people think, I can't wait to be rich and famous and stuff like that. And all of a sudden it's like, these people, what they turn into. It's really horrible. It really does destroy their lives. People that know that knew a lot of these actors before they get famous, you'll ask them, they tell you about the big change that happens. They change. They become Scrooges. You can't even talk with them. Money changes them. There's nothing new under the sun. In the end, in a sense, a house is just a house. Whether it's a big one or a small one, a house is just a house. Clothes is just clothes. Shoes are just shoes. You can never keep up with the latest fashions. You'll never have all the technology. Who has an iPhone 5? Guess what? iPhone 6 is getting ready to come out too eventually. It's just like, what do you do? Cool, I got an Xbox 360. Oh yeah? Well, Xbox 720 is getting ready to come out. And it's like, and I mean, you buy a car, and as soon as you get out of the lot, it just depreciated like, who knows how many thousands of dollars. It's like, are you serious? I drove 12 feet and it just lost $12,000. Like, really? Think about how much life we waste trying to build life and find meaning from things under the sun. Me personally, I used to complain that I never had enough money to pursue more holy endeavors when I was younger. And so, what I did with my money? I went and I wasted it on nightclubs. I would go and I would waste it on nightclubs, and I remember when I was younger how I wanted to be cool, and let's see if anybody remembers these ones. I wanted to have Gerbeau jeans. Anybody remember Gerbeaus? Yeah, Brand X. I had to have Brand X Gerbeau jeans, and now, I look back and I look at the things that I was doing and, I never had enough money, and then, now I'm in a different situation. I'm like, man, I'm making it, and, I don't have as much money, and I'm like, geez, man, I was being a real idiot with my funds and what I thought I needed, and you find yourself, you look back on life, where have you come up short? You just look back, where have you come up short? Nothing, in a sense, nothing gets fixed. The things that we do to try to make the world right for us are not right. They don't end up being right. Gerbeau doesn't. I don't even know if they make jeans anymore. I mean, there you go, we're done, Now, the last few things that I've mentioned, and they have this obviousness about them in a sense. If you've been raised around a religious atmosphere, if you've been raised in a Christian home, or you've been around Christianity long enough, you know that those are obvious things that you don't build your life on. And the preacher I believe, he's aware of the obviousness of the sinfulness of lust and lustful desires and such. And he himself says that he somehow tried to lay hold on folly. He went after what he knew was wrong. He went after what he knew was wrong. He knew it in his head, but he had to come to know it in his heart, and the hard way, no doubt. But there are other seemingly good endeavors, in a sense, religious efforts that the preacher sought that might ground him. And the first one that he says that he went after was wisdom. Remember, Solomon's first request from God, who came to Solomon personally, was that he wanted an understanding mind. Now, wisdom is certainly good. Wisdom is a good thing. Okay, remember that wisdom is conclusions that are based on life experiences. Okay, in a sense, wisdom is the skill of life. It's insight into how life works. Okay, it's the skill of living. It's the acquisition of knowledge for the purpose of practical use. Okay, and Solomon, of all people, he had wisdom. Solomon had wisdom. And he says that his wisdom, he said, it surpassed all who were over Jerusalem before me, he says. But Solomon, the wisest of all men, look at him, he still comes up short. All the wisdom in the world, and he couldn't make straight what was crooked. Life still hid some answers from him. It still hid things. He came to realize that even all the wisdom and all the wise sayings in the world still couldn't deal with the fact that some things just go unexplained. And Job comes up here. Job comes up. As the readers of Job, we know what's going on before a disaster strikes Job. We know that. Job never knows that. Even at the end of the book, God doesn't tell him, hey, this is what I told Satan, and I was bragging about you, and I wanted Satan to see that you would love me for me and not for the things that I give you. And, so that's what's going on. Satan owes me $1 now. There you go, right? Trading places. There you go. Okay? But, Job doesn't know that. God never tells that to Job. And, and so there's this reality, too, that you start to see even that God is revealed as not having, or that he is not obligated to explain even his own actions to us. And that leaves a lot of mystery in life. That leaves a lot of mystery in life. For the Christian even, God, he never asks us to live by explanations, but to live by promises that he makes. So in a sense, reiterating what was said in our study on Proverbs, they're not laws. Proverbs are not promises. They're observations that have to be applied at the right time, in the right circumstances, by the right person, and to the right person. That is the skill of wisdom. The promises of blessings, in a sense, for hard work in the Proverbs, they don't always ring true. And I've told you, some of us, we can read, the money-making books, Think and Grow Rich, and, all these other stuff like that. And you try to do them, and you realize that you're $20 poorer for buying the book. You can engage in all types of, little programs, and, this is how you make money, and you recruit this, and you keep trying, and nobody ever signs up, and you never get money, and it's just like, it doesn't just work like a formula. For some people it does, and some people it doesn't. And it's like, well, what's the real trick? It's like, is it something that I have to do? And no matter what what you try to do and what you try to invest, for some people it just doesn't work, and some people it just naturally happens to. It's unexplainable. So the Proverbs, in a sense too, of health and wealth to those who work hard, those are not absolutely true. Again, they're not laws. They're not promises. Listen to the preacher in chapter 2, verse 22. He says, "What has a man from all the toil and the striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun?" And in a sense, what he's saying is sometimes life just doesn't make sense. We want it to make sense, and wisdom is an avenue that we might seek for meaning. Okay, and the wisdom here, that, in a sense, that he's seeking, it's not necessarily religious wisdom. Okay, it's just wisdom in general. Okay, so it could be anything here from education to philosophy, the sciences. Okay, education, even here in America and in the world, education was supposed to be the big savior once naturalistic, materialistic hit, and Darwinism and all stuff. In a sense, when Darwinism was applied to education, the idea was, well, what can we do to curb the violence? What's going to solve, everything? What's going to solve hunger in the world? What's going to solve poverty? Education. We just need to evolve our minds more, and that's going to change everything. We're smarter today than we were, a few hundred years ago. We're smarter today than when Darwinism was first discovered and introduced. Are we really in a better place? No, we're not. We're not. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. The more you come to know, the more you realize you don't know. More knowledge has a way of humbling you. It has its own way of humbling you. So wisdom alone won't do it. Chicken soup for the soul and inspirational readings or daily quotes, they won't do it. Knowledge, in the sense, of life and how it works, that's not enough. It will only reveal in the end how much we don't know and how much we can't ever know. But there are also those who try to ground their life on being religious, on being moral, by living according to some sort of ethical codes, whether it's the 10 Commandments, the Eightfold Path, the 5 Pillars of Islam, or whatever it is. Okay? I'll even go so far as to say that some people, in a sense, are banking on doctrinal correctness as their meaning in life. So in a sense, they're living according to the code of being right. Okay? And therefore seeking righteousness from their adherence to this code, whatever it is. Okay? Maybe people, in a sense, they want to be good. Okay? And that's the meaning of life, is to be good. Okay? So they won't go after sex, they won't go after drugs, they won't go after money, they won't go after material things, and they won't go after the easily identifiable sins. Okay? But rather, these want to be obedient. They want to be moral. Okay? These are the people, in a sense, they want to be right about every single thing. They want to be right in every single argument. They have to win at all costs. They're always right and everybody's always wrong, and that's the end of it. Okay? There's an idea here, in a sense, it's basically if I live my life according, at least for the person who tries to do it through Christianity, or using a Christian mask, if I live my life according to the commandments of God, then surely God must bless me. Surely God needs me to do His work in the world. And yet you start to realize that even these people, even the moral ones, even the good ones, they suffer the same fate as the wicked, about those who don't even care about morality at all. If it hasn't hit you already, surely you've seen, and it'll hit you. Sometimes, the good die young. Okay? If it hasn't hit you, it will eventually, that sometimes bad things happen to good people. It may even hit you that good things seems to happen to bad people. And the preacher says, in my vain life I have seen everything. There's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. Ecclesiastes 7:15. And how do we usually see this? We look at it as, well, you do all the religious things and all the moral things, and at some point you either don't get something you want, or you get something you didn't want, like tragedy, a lost job, a lost loved one, something like that, something that you didn't expect, and then in your heart of hearts you say this: all that being good, all that trying to follow the commandments, all that time in church, all that time serving, and for what? So I could have my loved one taken from me? All that service, and you can't even bring me a little happiness in a spouse, in a job, in that raise that I wanted? And what does the preacher say to this? In 7:16 he says, be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Now, he's not saying don't try to be too good, okay? And he's not saying you need to have a little evil in your life. Okay, that's not what he's saying there. What he's saying is don't be self-righteous. don't be self-righteous. That's not the way to do it either. Okay? Don't be the one who's always wanting to be right and who can never be wrong. You will destroy yourself. And you've seen people do it. The person who cannot lose will literally destroy themselves from the inside out. When they're the only ones that are always right, and if everybody in the world is wrong, and they can, you can have evidence clearly that they're wrong right in front of them, and they still won't see it. You've destroyed yourself. You've destroyed yourself. You isolate yourself, in a sense, from them because they're different. You start to ostracize. You start to oppress. The Pharisees did this. They considered themselves so right, so holy, and so moral that they felt defiled around lesser people. You remember their attitude toward sinners. Remember that time that things didn't go right in your life? When we questioned God too? God, why is this happening to me? That attitude reveals that kind of heart. And so we have to just face it. Life is a mess. Life is confusing at times. Sometimes you think you have it all figured out, and then life throws you that curveball. No matter how much insight you think, no matter how much you think you have it all together, it never quite works out the way you want. It never quite works out perfectly. In fact, and this is from Ecclesiastes 3, it says, for everything there is a season. Now, before you think that Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8 is about, in a sense, kind of rolling with the punches and just taking life as it comes at you, really, that passage, it's a strong statement about the inevitability of the things that are listed. It's a strong statement about the inevitability of the things that are listed. There's a time for life. There's a time for death that you can do nothing about. When it's your time, it's your time. And nowadays, there's a big craze in some communities for health, and you have to live long. You got to do it this way, and it's like you can do 1,000 push-ups without stopping, walk out the door, and get hit by a bus. And what did all those 1,000 push-ups do for you? Nothing. Oh, I've got a strong heart. Doctor says I'm healthy. Boom, accident. There's an appointed time for everything. The inevitability of things that are going to happen in life, whether we want them to happen or not. Now, the Bible is not presenting fatalism here, okay? But rather, it's presenting the idea of a God who has decreed things to happen that are outside of our control, but that are in God's sovereign control. God has ordered all things. He's ordered the things. He's even ordered the things that are crooked that cannot be made straight. Ecclesiastes 7:13, it says, consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? That is what God has put under his curse from the fall. You're not going to undo that. You can't undo that. The world and human beings were under sin. The world was cursed by God when Adam fell. Mankind was cursed. And it's not merely God's doing, but it's the result of our sin. The fall really did ruin and frustrate the world so that the world can be very dark. The world can be very lonely. It can be very confusing and appear to be very futile. Things happen. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. Alarm clock, hit it, wake up, get dressed, work. It's cyclic. And it can appear that way. It can appear futile. Ecclesiastes 7:29, it lays all the blame for this on sin. He says, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. Life under the sun, life lived only in this world, it's a futile life. If you guys know anything about Greek mythology, there's the story of the myth of Sisyphus. Okay, he was basically condemned to roll this rock up a hill, and right when he's about to get up, the rock rolls right back down. And what's he condemned to do? Get the rock back up, only to have it go all the way back down. That was his condemnation. Okay? That is one part of the wisdom that Ecclesiastes seeks to give, is that life apart from God, life under the sun, life without God at the center is futile. Okay? And you don't have to be an atheist to live this way either. You just have to turn something that God created into your ultimate meaning in life, into your drive, into your everything for your reason for living, and the frustration is inevitable. Frustration is inevitable. Life apart from God is a cursed one. So that raises the question, okay? And it gets us to the second aspect of the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. And the question is this, well, what's this life for then? St. Augustine, in his book Confessions, he prayed this. He said, "Great art thou, O Lord, and greatly to be praised. Great is thy power, and of thy wisdom there is no end. And man, being a part of thy creation, desires to praise thee. Man, who bears about with him his mortality, the witness of his sin, even the witness that thou resistest the proud. Yet man, this part of thy creation, desires to praise thee." He says this, "Thou movest us to delight in praising thee, for thou hast formed us for thyself, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in thee." What's Augustine saying here? Well, he's basically echoing what Ecclesiastes has been trying to say all along, that we were created for much more than this earthly life under the sun. We were created really to be in a garden. But not just any garden, it's a temple garden that we were created to be in, where God and man walk together in fellowship. We were created to worship God and to honor Him above all else. But through sin, through our schemes, as Solomon puts it, and our many devices, we were obviously no longer in that temple garden. We're not there anymore. Rather, we find ourselves in a cursed earth. We've been expelled from the garden. But that doesn't mean that we don't long for it. That doesn't mean that we don't have this sort of deep ingrained remembrance of it in our humanity. You know, we all have this internal drive for something something lasting, something significant, and we look for that. And that's what, in a sense, that's what the preacher's been saying, is that we do look for it, but we look for it in the wrong places. We look for it in the wrong places. In our fallen state, we long for meaning, we long for enjoyment, we long for significance in our work, in our hobbies, in our homes, in whatever we put our hands and hearts to, only to find ourselves still restless in the world. And why? Because we were not made for this world alone. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says this. He says, "God has put eternity into man's heart." God has put eternity into man's heart. That's just another way of basically saying you're made for more than this. You're made for more than life under the sun. We were created for something grander. So, what do we find enjoyment in? What's this life for? Now, the preacher actually offers several hints, of what we can do in this life. For instance, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 12 through 13, he says this, "I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man." Likewise, in Ecclesiastes 8:15, we read, "And I commend joy, for man has no good thing under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun." Now, quite frankly, not only because I recently saw The Hobbit again, but that kind of life, the eating, drinking, and just being joyful and taking pleasure, in a sense, in some of the simple things in life, that really does remind me of a hobbit, okay? In the Lord of the Rings series, hobbits are described as they love peace and quiet, okay? They are apt to laughter and to eating and drinking. The enjoyment that God gives in this life is basically to be able to enjoy the fruit of one's labor. Okay, not to bank on it in the sense that that's my eternal thing, but even to be able to enjoy it. That's part of what this life is for. In a sense, to find contentment in the little things. To find contentment. There's a sense in which the gift of God is to enjoy what we have, not to strive for what we don't. Enjoy what you have, and don't waste your life striving for what you don't have. Okay, but he's not promoting the sort of pie in the sky sort of religion, I guess, if you want to call it that way, okay, or that sort of life. Okay, really, what he's promoting is faith in God. He's promoting faith in God. That is to say, apart from God. Okay, the preacher's arguing that he's ultimately arguing for trust in God. Trust in the ultimate wisdom of God as higher than our ability to make sense of life. In a sense, he's basically saying, don't try to figure it all out. Enjoy the things that I give you and be happy with that. Food, drink, laughter, good company. Enjoy those things. Don't go after all the big pleasures. Don't go after the fame and the stardom and the money. You'll miss the good things in life. Listen to the summation of the matter in Ecclesiastes 12. This is Ecclesiastes 12, 13, and 14. He says, this is the end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Fear God. That's the point in life, he says. Fear God. That is, to fear God is to be so overwhelmed by the reality of God that his existence controls what you do and how you live. The life under the sun, in a sense, is a life lived as if God didn't exist. Okay? Life under the sun is looking for ultimate meaning in life where God has not assigned ultimate meaning. It's going against God's design for creation to worship and serve the creature rather than the creator, as Romans 1:25 says. That is, building life on anything other than God, according to the Bible, will inevitably lead to futility. Okay, which is, it's doing the same thing over and over and expecting something to be different, but with no real results. Isn't that like a clinical definition of insanity? I think I heard that one time. Okay, but it's foolishness. Continuing in the wisdom of Proverbs, Proverbs says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. So when Ecclesiastes sums up the meaning of life, fear God, he's not saying anything different than Proverbs has already said. So he's sharing, in a sense, he's sharing the same wisdom, he's just giving a different perspective on how it works. Ecclesiastes, it's offered as another balance to the wisdom literature of Proverbs. Okay, Proverbs attempts, in a sense, to reveal that wisdom and knowledge are possible, and one should acquire them in order to have skill in life. Okay, so that's what Proverbs is trying to say. But then Job offers another perspective on wisdom, in that there are things that happen in life that you cannot understand, no matter how much wisdom or how much religion you have. And now Ecclesiastes is another way of saying that life is not as mechanical as you would like it to be. That is, you can't just, do good things in a sense, like God is this machine, and you plug in your variables in there, and bam, out comes the result automatically. Okay? God is not like that. God is not like that. You don't plug these variables again into the equation of life, and bam, instant happiness or success, as if God was a machine, as if God was not a person, and as if God simply responds to what we do, as if God didn't have his own plan, his own agenda that he's trying to run. No, Ecclesiastes, it's a reminder that we live in a fallen world. And because we live in a fallen world with sin in all of its expressions, with all of its resources, and with all of its own goals, God has a way of reminding us that our hope cannot be here in this life alone. In fact, Paul puts it this way, and even for religious purposes, and for Christians, he says it this way. He says, if in Christ we have hope in this life only. Okay, this is 1 Corinthians 15, I believe, maybe 18 or 23, something like that. But if we have Christ, if in Christ we have hope in this life only, okay, read it this way. If in Christ we have hope, we only have hope under the sun, we are of all people to be most pitied. If our hope is only in this life, we are to be most pitied. That is to say, if our hopes only rest in this world, then ultimately it's meaningless. Ultimately, it is meaningless. No matter what your religion, if it's only for here, nothing. You're ultimately worm food. I mean, look at it that way then. If that's it. The theory of evolution, it spawned a philosophy known as naturalistic materialism. Naturalism, as it's sometimes called, it yielded a philosophy known as nihilism, okay, in which teaches that essentially there's no meaning to anything. There's no meaning, there's meaning nowhere, okay? Life is just this big cosmic accident. Carl Sagan, he used to open up his television series by saying the cosmos. All there ever was, is, and will be. That's it. It's pretty grim. That's really, really grim. Okay? The biggest threat that we all face, that Ecclesiastes brings out quite a few times, is the reality that we all still have to face death. We all still have to face death. No matter how hard you work for money or your possessions, you will inevitably die and leave them to someone else who may or may not appreciate what you worked hard for. No matter how knowledgeable or how wise you are still going to die. No matter how much you go to church and serve God, you will still face death one way or the other. This life alone and all that it has to offer is all vanity. It's like when Jesus, he tells the story of this rich man who's, basically says to himself, I've made a lot of money, I've got a lot of goods, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to start building barns, and I'm going to put all my stuff in bigger barns and bigger storehouses. And what was the word of the Lord to him? Thou fool, tonight your life will be required of you. Just like that. Just like that. No matter how much Botox, no matter how much exercise, no matter how much makeup, no matter how much, dress up in the fancy suits and ties, we still have to face old age and we still have to face death. I told you Ecclesiastes is a sober punch in the face. This guy needs a hug, man. Ecclesiastes really does portray, in a sense, life under the sun, life in this world alone, as under the judgment of God. The wisdom is given by the one shepherd in 12:11. Okay? James Hamilton, he said this. He said, the preacher seeks to deliver his audience through the condemnation of their vanity and the things that they will regret as they age and die. Through judgment, he wants to save them to enjoy God's glory. That is to say, the preacher, because he lived through the vanity of life, he took upon himself the very judgments of vanity and futility of what life is like outside of God and lived without God. So in a sense, the preacher, Solomon here, in a sense, as experiencing God's judgment, as experiencing the futility, the preacher is passing on the wisdom that he has gained. But we know a better preacher. We know a better teacher. We know one who took upon himself the fullness of the judgment of God, of a life apart from God, and he even underwent the darkness of heaven's back upon him, and that is Jesus Christ. You see, Jesus Christ, he lived his life in our place, taking upon himself our vanity, our sins, and the judgment of our futility. On the cross, Jesus Christ displayed fully what a life alienated from God looks like. A life under God's curse. A life of confusion as he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? But this death, it wasn't meant, in a sense, it wasn't just to be a ransom from this life. It wasn't merely meant to, to forgive us. It was meant really to bring a whole new life. It was meant to give meaning to life. The proof that he did that is in his resurrection. Jesus Christ, in his resurrection, he offers to everyone a way out of the futility. He offers a life that can be lived beyond the grave. So in a sense, Jesus Christ, because of his death and resurrection, he gives a hope in this life under the sun, okay, S-U-N, for a better future life under the sun, S-O-N. A life under the sun. Because Jesus Christ is the only hope for a future life, he makes this life faceable. That is to say, if all our hopes are in what we do before we die, everything, no matter how fun, how pleasurable, and how good, will always come to an end. Okay, again, failing health, injury, sickness, disease, or through inevitable death, it will all prove vain. It's all a vanity. There is nothing in this life that you can bank on, okay? Nothing that you can find that will yield an ultimate return or satisfaction, okay? Your soul wasn't created for that. Only in Jesus do we find true hope, because he offers a hope beyond this world. We can live this life in such a way that we can accept the good and we can accept the bad that's coming our way, because this world isn't it. Life under the sun isn't the only thing. The good, God gives us glimpses, in a sense, of the greater good that is to come. Okay, but the bad always reminds us, at least as Christians, that we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Even as Christians, we're still prone to making idols in this world. And God has a way of taking away, things that we want to cling to, and he has a way of basically saying, not those, me. Not those. You need my Son. You need Jesus Christ. Not what these things have to offer. So in a sense, what the preacher kind of rejects, and some people tend to live by this philosophy, they live by the carpe diem philosophy. Seize the day. Okay? And they do that. But what the preacher's getting us to consider in wisdom is he's basically saying, consider that what you do in this life, and the way it was said in the movie Gladiator, what you do in life echoes in eternity. How you live this life now will inevitably determine where you're going. And toward the end of it, if you read Ecclesiastes, toward the end, he talks about youth, and because that's an ideal age in a sense, while you're still young, to consider these questions. If you don't consider them then, the older you get, the harder you get in your ways. And it's very hard, in a sense, to get religion when you get older. I mean, it's all of grace for sure, but just, in an ordinary way of speaking of it, it's good to consider these things when you're young. And, he reminds them, you're young, yes, good. Just remember, you're going to face God's judgment one day. And all those things that you think are cool to do when you're young, you're gonna pay for it at some point. And so we ask, what are we living for? What are we living for? And this is really what Ecclesiastes wants us to consider. If it's not God, it's going to be brought under God's judgment. The preacher reminds us whether it's good or evil, all of it is going to come under the scrutiny of God. All will come under judgment. The ultimate judgment is the condemnation to an eternal life of ongoing futility. A life of eternal disappointment. A life of eternal vanity. A life of never being satisfied. A life of continual striving. That basically is what hell is like. Jesus described it as a place of unquenchable fire. Okay, I mean, imagine you're trying to put out a fire and it never goes out. Okay, in a sense, that's what hell is like. That's what hell is like. Hell is never satisfied. No matter how much of you it takes and consumes, hell is forever and ever. It is ongoing futility. Jesus Christ, the true preacher, the true bearer of the judgment, offers his life to you. Believe in him. Trust in him and trust in his wisdom. When we don't understand life, God ultimately asks us to trust him, not life. Don't live to find something ultimate in this life. The truest pleasure in this life is God. It's God. As John Piper says, God is the gospel. God is the gospel. He is the good news. Heaven is not the good news. The good news is God is going to be with us. God is going to be with us. That's been the promise from the Bible. If you read from Genesis to Revelation, God with us is the big promise. That's what made the fall so significant. We were expelled from the presence of God. The Emmanuel principle, we've seen it in the Old Testament. I will be with you. That's the Emmanuel principle. God with us. That's his promise. Christ and his pleasures that he offers, they're truer and they're better because they are eternal and they're not limited to life under the sun, S-U-N. And so examine yourselves. Examine yourselves and ask yourself these questions to see if if what you're living for is here. Sometimes these are some questions to help. What makes me feel the most self-worth? What helps me feel the most wanted? Maybe is it something that I have? For some people, sometimes rich people, it's their car. That's what makes them feel, their self-worth. Sometimes it's their clothes. Sometimes the way we dress is to cover up other things. Sometimes it's what we can do. It's our gifts. And we'll use those things. Of what am I the proudest? For what do I want to be known for? What is my hope for the future? Early on when I meet people, what do I want to make sure that people know about me? What do I really want and expect out of life? What would really make me happy? And those can be very deep and soul-searching questions, but Ecclesiastes tells us that if the answer is found in anything that is under the sun, we will not find the satisfaction that we want. We'll only find vanity and futility. Only in the gospel can we have a right approach to the things of this world as fallen and temporary glimpses of the eternal pleasures to come. Otherwise, we are asking the things under the sun to hold up the weight of our souls, and they can't do that. They can't do that. Only Jesus is able to do that as he took upon himself the weight of your sin on his cross. And so our only hope, the only place that we look to, is to the resurrected Christ alone for hope beyond this world, to a life that will one day be lived under the Son of God. Amen.